Can't be I got up wrong. I never went to bed.
Ken Curtis made millions laugh as Festus on Gunsmoke, but behind that funny voice and easy smile, he had a real list of people who rubbed him the wrong way. He wasn't the type to start drama, but he didn't hide it when someone made his work harder. Some actors slowed him down. Some clashed with his style. Some stepped into his spotlight at the wrong time. And a few just pushed his patience in ways fans never saw. These weren't huge fights, but they were real moments that stuck with him. Before his death, Curtis opened up about the co-stars who tested him the most. Join us as we reveal the 7 names that left the biggest mark on him, and the stories he never forgot. Pat Brady. Before Ken Curtis ever became Festus, he lived in the world of Western music. He stepped into the Sons of the Pioneers at a time when the group was built on clean harmonies, emotional cowboy ballads, and a polished sound. Curtis took that role seriously. He knew the group's reputation. He also knew he was singing in a space once held by people like Roy Rogers. So he made sure every note, every breath, and every performance stayed tight and controlled. But Pat Brady came from a different lane. He was the comic spark inside the group, the man known for jokes, funny faces, and a more playful presence on stage. His personality made people laugh, which worked great for shows, but it didn't always blend with the serious, harmony-driven sound Curtis was trying to maintain. That difference created quiet tension long before anyone said a word about it. When Curtis stood up to sing a slow Western ballad, he wanted the stage to feel clean and steady. He wanted the focus on the harmony. He wanted the moment to land. But Brady's style leaned toward loosening things up. He preferred personality over perfection, and audiences loved him for it. He turned the mood light, even when a song was meant to feel deep. Their approaches kept brushing up against each other, and every time they performed together, the contrast felt sharper. Some nights, Curtis could feel the shift as soon as the show began. He would step forward to sing, and Brady would play around behind him, adding movement, jokes, or reactions that Curtis felt pulled attention away from the song. Curtis wasn't the kind of man who liked chaos in a performance. He wanted the group to look unified, to sound as one. So moments like that didn't sit well. People close to the group often said, "The Sons of the Pioneers worked like a small family," and families always have strong opinions about how things should be done. Curtis believed in leading with music. Brady believed in leading with energy. Both were right in their own way, but when one wants to tighten the reins and the other wants to loosen them, the middle ground becomes harder to find. And the pressures around them didn't help. The group was evolving, adding new voices, new players, and new sounds. Every change created questions about who should lead, which direction they should take, and how the stage should feel. Curtis, as a lead singer, naturally pushed toward structure. Brady, as a performer with a long history of comedy in Western shows, pushed toward personality and entertainment. That difference could feel like a storm waiting to happen. Even though Curtis respected Brady's talent, their styles simply didn't flow easily together. They moved differently, thought differently, and played differently. Curtis wanted discipline. Brady wanted freedom. When two performers want opposite things while sharing the same stage, it becomes easy to understand how quiet frustration can grow. Still, what kept things balanced was professionalism. They worked through it, they performed, and they delivered what fans wanted. But looking back, it's clear why Curtis would remember their time together as one filled with personal clashes. James Arness. When Ken Curtis first stepped onto the Gunsmoke set, James Arness was already the king of Dodge City. He had been playing Marshal Matt Dillon for years, and the show revolved around him. So when Ken arrived as Festus, things did not fall into place right away. Their chemistry on screen looked natural, but behind the scenes it took time to get there. Arness was protective of his character. He cared deeply about how Matt Dillon looked, talked, and acted. He also kept a close eye on how much time each character got on screen. Because of that, Ken's early days were not as smooth as fans might assume. Festus was supposed to be more than a sidekick. He had a different personality. He was funnier, louder, and full of color. At first, that did not sit well with Arness, and Ken could feel the difference. Their scenes worked, but the atmosphere behind the camera felt stiff. And this tension kept growing because the audience started paying attention to Festus. He had a humor that made the episodes feel alive. Fans wrote letters. They wanted to see more of him. They liked how he challenged Matt Dillon with quick remarks and stubborn charm. But more love for Festus meant more pressure for Arness. It meant reshaping the balance of the show. Arness had been the center of Gunsmoke for nearly a decade, and now someone new was stepping into the spotlight. That shift created small clashes, especially when scenes felt uneven, or when Curtis added more personality to Festus in ways Arness was not expecting. And even though they did not yell or fight, the tension was real. Many people on set noticed it, and Curtis did too. He once shared that working with a star as big as Arness meant giving them room first, before finding his own space. That room did not come easily. Their styles were different. Arness was calm, reserved, and slow with his lines. Curtis was quicker, more expressive, and sometimes more natural. So when they acted together, the timing had to blend perfectly, or the scene would feel off. In the beginning, Arness did not love how Festus's personality could steal the moment. And Curtis felt it. It created a distance that was hard to ignore. But the interesting part is what happened next. Their early tensions actually forced them to understand each other. They had to figure out how to make their characters work side by side. They had to adjust, adapt, and trust that the show was big enough for both of them. And that adjustment brought a shift that even the crew could see. Arness slowly realized that Ken Curtis was not trying to take his place. Festus only made the episodes richer. Curtis gave the audience something new without taking anything away from Matt Dillon's authority. And as the seasons continued, the distance began to fade. They talked more, they laughed more, they figured out each other's rhythm. What started as silent clashes slowly turned into a steady working connection. And that connection eventually grew into something better than anyone expected. Arness stopped seeing Curtis as competition. He started seeing him as a partner. And Curtis, who had walked onto the set feeling like the new guy, now saw Arness as someone he could trust. Their bond grew so much that many later interviews described them as close friends. The tension that once existed became part of their history, not their future. And it is the reason their scenes look so real today. Milburn Stone. On screen, Festus and Doc Adams looked like an old married couple in Dodge City, always fussing, always circling back to each other. Behind that easy chemistry, though, Ken Curtis and Milburn Stone sometimes pulled in different directions. It was not open war, and there's no proof Ken truly hated Stone, but their work styles did clash, especially over one big thing. Should a scene feel funny or dead serious? That is where the quiet feud really lived. Milburn Stone had spent decades building himself as a serious actor. By the time he became Doc Adams in 1955, he had already done more than 150 movies and TV roles, and he went on to appear in over 600 episodes of Gunsmoke, basically living as Doc for 20 years. Viewers saw him as family, the calm, steady doctor who spoke for life and death in Dodge City. His job on the show was heavy. He delivered bad news, treated gunshot wounds, and carried the emotional weight when characters were sick, broken, or dying. Ken Curtis, on the other hand, came to Gunsmoke from a very different lane. He had been a singer, a singing cowboy type, and he learned early how to turn moments into comedy. In one story he told, He explained how, during the Searchers, he started talking in his dry land dialect from Colorado, and director John Ford liked it so much he turned what should have been a romantic scene into a funny one. Curtis tucked that voice away until Gunsmoke called. When Dennis Weaver left and Chester was gone, the producers came back to that Hagen character and asked Curtis in, this time to stay. His job now was clear. Festus would bring the comedy. The article even notes that in Chester's absence, it's up to Festus to provide comedy relief, and that Curtis himself said he liked this because he could have fun with Festus Hagen in a way he could not as a straight leading man. You can imagine what happens when someone whose role is to keep things serious stands next to someone whose job is to lighten the mood. Every shared scene becomes a tiny tug-of-war over tone. Doc is trying to warn Matt about an infection, or talk about a man who might die overnight. Festus walks in with his scratchy voice and sideways country talk, and suddenly the audience wants to laugh. That is where Curtis and Stone often disagreed. It was not that they hated each other as people. It was that they had different ideas about what a moment should feel like. Stone had spent years getting people to care about Doc's words. He knew that if you undercut a tragic moment with a joke, some of that power is lost. Curtis knew that if Festus stopped being funny, he would fail at what the producers hired him to do. One wanted to guard the drama. The other had to protect the comedy. So they pushed back, sometimes quietly, sometimes more firmly. Stone, who had seen every kind of film from B-Western to prestige pictures like The Long Gray Line, took his craft seriously. He had built Doc as a real man, not a cartoon, and he did not want that ruined for a cheap laugh. Curtis, coming from music, radio, and lighter roles, knew how much the show needed that laugh to keep episodes from feeling too heavy. When a script leaned toward tragedy, Stone would naturally want to keep the scene straight. When a script gave Festus a chance for a joke or a quirky line, Curtis did not want to cut it down to nothing. That difference could feel, in the moment, like a feud. It was really two professionals both trying to defend what they brought to the table. The respect was still there. The article makes it clear that both men were solid working actors, each with a long career behind them, not rookies trying to prove themselves. They showed up, did the work, and kept the show strong for years. But under the surface, the tension between somber Doc and comic Festus never fully went away. You can almost see it in their scenes together. Doc's eyes narrowing when Festus cracks a joke in the middle of a crisis. Festus acting like he is not bothered, then poking a little more. That push and pull is what makes their relationship feel real even now. It is also what makes it easy to believe that, in private, Curtis sometimes felt blocked by Stone's serious approach, and Stone sometimes felt that Curtis's humor walked too close to the edge. They still shared the screen, they still made it work, and they still gave fans some of the most memorable moments on Gunsmoke. But if you look at how different their styles were and how clearly Curtis was asked to be the clown while Stone carried the weight, it is not hard to see where the cracks in their working relationship started and why Ken might quietly place Doc's name on the list of co-stars who tested his patience the most, even as he respected the man behind the role. Roger Ewing. When Roger Ewing stepped onto the Gunsmoke set as Thad Greenwood, he walked into a world that was already shifting. The producers wanted a fresh young face. They wanted someone who could take on bigger stories and maybe even grow into a major star on the show. And for a short time, it looked like Roger Ewing would be that person. But at the exact same moment, Ken Curtis was rising fast as Festus. Fans loved Festus. They loved his voice, his humor, and the way he brought life into quiet scenes. Every letter the show received, every crowd reaction pushed him forward. So when Thad came in, the energy behind the scenes changed without anyone saying a word. It wasn't a loud fight. It wasn't a heated argument. It was something quieter. Something that people only felt when the cameras stopped rolling. Two characters were being built at the same time, and only one of them could become the heart of Dodge City. Roger Ewing was young, tall, and serious. He carried himself with a stillness that fit the Western style, but his acting pace was slower. He liked careful movements. He liked simple delivery. Ken Curtis, on the other hand, was fast. He came from music, comedy, and years of live performing. His timing was sharp, and Festus worked best when scenes felt quick and lively. When they acted together, these two styles didn't always blend. Curtis sometimes felt like Ewing held the scene back. Ewing sometimes felt like Curtis pushed too far ahead. And instead of working together as partners, they started working like two men trying to protect their own space on the show. Even fans noticed the difference. Many viewers connected with Festus within weeks. His character had personality. He had jokes. He had a way of walking into a room and pulling the attention without even trying. Thad, on the other hand, had a quieter presence. So when the audience started cheering more for Festus, producers naturally shifted in that direction. More episodes for Festus meant fewer big moments for Thad, and that created a pressure that settled right between Curtis and Ewing. Neither man said it out loud, but the competition was real. It showed in the way Ewing stood in scenes, a little stiff, a little unsure, almost like he was trying not to get swallowed by Festus's energy. It showed in how Curtis delivered his lines, firm and confident, as if daring Ewing to keep up. The camera caught these little moments, and viewers have talked about them ever since. People who watched the show back then sometimes say the same thing. Thad looked uncomfortable next to Festus. That feeling came from the silent tension they carried. It wasn't personal hatred. It was the simple truth that one of them was becoming the show's next big favorite, and the other felt like his chance was slipping away. And the more the writers leaned toward Festus, the more Ewing felt the ground moving under him. Scenes where Thad was meant to look strong suddenly looked uneven when Festus stepped in with charisma and timing that Ewing couldn't match. Curtis wasn't trying to push him out, but he understood the rhythm of performance in a deeper way, and that rhythm naturally led the audience back to him. Over time, the quiet rivalry became part of their working relationship. Curtis respected Ewing, but he knew Thad would never reach the level the producers hoped for. Ewing respected Curtis, but he knew Festus's rise meant his own time on the show had limits, and every scene they filmed together carried that weight. It is the kind of tension you only see on long-running shows, where characters grow, the audience shifts, and the spotlight moves whether the actors are ready or not. For Curtis, working with Ewing meant working through that silent struggle, knowing that the show would eventually choose one path. And for Ewing, every day on set reminded him that the path was pointing toward Festus, not Thad. Glenn Strange. When Glenn Strange played Sam the bartender on Gunsmoke, he became one of the most familiar faces in Dodge City. He was tall, calm, and steady, and fans loved the gentle way he ran the Long Branch Saloon. But behind the scenes, Glenn Strange was not the same strong man people saw on screen. By the later seasons, he had lived a long, demanding life in Hollywood. He had injuries from his years doing westerns, stunt work, and long hours on rough sets. Age added even more pressure, and simple movements took longer than before. Walking across the set, lifting props, or even turning the right way for a camera mark sometimes needed extra time. Ken Curtis came from the opposite side of that world. He was sharp, quick, and full of energy. His years as a singer and performer gave him a natural rhythm. Festus worked best when scenes moved fast, with quick lines and fast reactions. Curtis could hit a joke, spin around, change his tone, and bounce into the next beat without missing a step. So when he shared scenes with Strange, their different speeds stood out immediately. Crew members who watched them work often said the same thing. Strange liked to take his time. Curtis liked to keep things moving. And when cameras were rolling, that difference could stretch a simple scene into a long filming day. Curtis never disliked Strange as a person. They respected each other and had many good moments. But the slow pace sometimes pushed Curtis into frustration. He had to repeat lines. He had to wait for Strange to settle into place. He had to adjust his own timing so the scene didn't look uneven. And for an actor like Curtis, who thrived on a quick flow, slowing down felt like losing control of the moment. You can feel that tension if you watch some of their scenes today. Festus comes in with his usual speed, talking fast, moving fast, reacting fast. Sam answers calmly, slowly, with a quiet tone that fits his character but pulls the energy down. That contrast was charming on screen, but filming it took patience. Some days were longer than others, especially when Strange struggled with movement or needed multiple takes to get a line right. Curtis didn't want scenes to drag. He didn't want the natural humor of Festus to lose spark. But matching Strange meant he had to hold himself back. That push and pull sometimes created irritation, the kind that builds quietly between actors who work very differently. And even though Curtis never exploded or argued loudly, those small frustrations do something over time. They change how you step into each scene. They make you second-guess how much energy to bring. They make you feel like you're giving more than you're getting back. Curtis was a professional. He didn't let the tension ruin the work, but crew members noticed when he took deeper breaths between takes or walked away for a moment to reset. Strange noticed too, and sometimes he apologized, knowing his body didn't move like it used to. Strange had been a stuntman, a monster actor, and a Western regular for decades. He had injuries that never healed fully, and during the later seasons of Gunsmoke, he still pushed through the pain to keep Sam alive on screen. That determination was admirable, but it also meant Curtis had to adjust again and again. Each scene became a dance between two styles, one slowed by age, one driven by rhythm. And every time Curtis had to wait for Strange or repeat a take, the quiet irritation grew a little more. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't a fight. It was the natural friction that happens when one actor is speeding forward and the other is holding the brakes without meaning to. Their friendship stayed intact, but their working pace never matched. And for Curtis, that mismatch made Strange one of the few co-stars who truly tested his patience on long shooting days. Amanda Blake. When Amanda Blake stepped into the role of Miss Kitty, she shaped the heart of Gunsmoke in a way few actors ever did. She carried the emotion of the show, the quiet moments, the romantic hints, and the softer side of Dodge City. Blake understood that Kitty's scenes needed control. They needed weight. They needed a tone that didn't get lost in noise or jokes. So she protected that space with everything she had. And that is where her small clashes with Ken Curtis began. Curtis came onto the show with a very different energy. Festus was built on humor. His voice, his expressions, and his timing were all designed to lighten even the heaviest moments. Fans loved that about him. Producers depended on it. But when Festus walked into a scene with Kitty, the tone could shift in seconds. Blake would be delivering a serious line, something romantic or emotional, and Curtis would enter with a funny remark or a quirky movement. That change could cut the moment short, and Blake felt it every time it happened. She didn't dislike Curtis as a person. She respected him, but she was protective of what Kitty represented. In her mind, the Long Branch Saloon was more than a set. It was Miss Kitty's world, and scenes in that world had rules. They were meant to be played straight, especially when the writing gave Kitty depth or vulnerability. Curtis, however, had a job to do. Festus worked best when he brought energy into a scene. He had to move fast, talk fast, and break tension in a way that made viewers laugh. It wasn't personal, it was the character, but that character could easily disrupt the slow emotional burn that Blake worked so hard to build. Crew members noticed these moments. They saw Blake pull back a little when Curtis entered. They saw Curtis try to find his place in scenes that were far more delicate than the usual Festus moments. And they saw the small reactions that created quiet tension between the two actors. Blake sometimes felt that Curtis didn't understand how important those emotional scenes were. She thought he rushed them or softened their impact. Curtis sometimes felt Blake took things too seriously, especially when a scene could benefit from a lighter touch. And each time they worked together, that difference in vision created another small spark. If you watch their scenes today, you can feel the line between their styles. Kitty stands calm, controlled, often holding the center of the room. Festus arrives with movement and noise, pulling the air in a new direction. Blake wanted the romance between Kitty and Matt to shine. She wanted the dramatic moments to land without being interrupted. So when Curtis burst into a scene with humor, she sometimes saw it as stepping into her emotional lane. Curtis didn't mean to interrupt the mood, but comedy moves differently than drama. It enters fast, it takes space, and it asks the audience to shift their attention. That natural clash made some filming days feel uneven. Blake could get frustrated when she felt a dramatic beat was lost. Curtis could get frustrated when he felt he had to hold back. And even though they kept things professional, those small frustrations stayed between them, shaping the way they acted around each other in future scenes. What kept their relationship from turning into a real feud was simple respect. They knew each other's strengths. Blake admired Curtis's humor and the life he brought to the show. Curtis admired Blake's ability to command a room with quiet strength. But when the cameras rolled, their goals were different. Blake wanted depth. Curtis wanted movement. And that difference created a fine line they had to walk every time they shared the screen. It was not anger. It was not dislike. It was the natural friction that forms when drama meets comedy in the same tight space. And both actors believe in the work they're doing. Burt Reynolds. When Burt Reynolds joined Gunsmoke as Quint Asper, he walked onto the set with the kind of confidence only a rising young star could carry. He was fast, bold, and full of charm. He didn't move like the older cast. He didn't speak like them either. Reynolds had a modern swagger that made him stand out right away, and viewers noticed it almost instantly. But behind the scenes, that same swagger created small cracks between him and Ken Curtis. Curtis came from the old-school Western world. He learned discipline from singing, timing from performing, and structure from years of acting in a way that respected every beat of the script. His work style was tight and controlled. He hit his marks. He delivered his lines with precision. He believed in following the rhythm of the scene exactly as written. Reynolds, on the other hand, loved to loosen things up. He liked throwing in a smile where the script didn't ask for one. He liked improvising, shifting his tone, or changing the energy of a scene to make it feel more natural and playful. He once joked that the older actors never quite knew what to do with me, and on Gunsmoke, that was truer than ever. Curtis wasn't used to this style. When the cameras rolled and Reynolds tried something new, it could throw off the timing. A scene that needed a pause suddenly had a joke. A moment that needed stillness suddenly had movement. And for an actor like Curtis, who treated timing as the backbone of a good scene, that shift could feel like losing balance. Reynolds didn't mean to cause trouble. He was simply young and full of ideas. He wanted scenes to feel real, and his natural way of acting made him unpredictable in a way that excited viewers but challenged co-stars. For Curtis, that unpredictability sometimes felt like disrespect for the structure that kept the show running smoothly. And during long filming days, that difference created friction they both felt. Watching their scenes even now, you can sense the contrast. Quint steps into a moment with loose confidence, ready to bend the scene if it feels right. Festus stands firm, guarded by old-fashioned discipline. The mix isn't always smooth. Sometimes the energy flows well. Other times it bumps, turns, or stalls for a second, just enough to reveal the silent spark between them. Curtis respected Reynolds' talent. He saw why the audience liked him. But he also felt the pressure whenever Reynolds' improvising slowed a scene or shifted its tone. Curtis had spent his career trying to make performances clean and controlled. So working with someone who seemed to jump from instinct could be frustrating, especially when the scene depended on tight timing. Reynolds, meanwhile, sensed that the older cast didn't always understand his looser style. and instead of hiding it, he leaned into it, which only made the gap between him and Curtis a little wider. This wasn't a loud feud or open fight. It was simply two men working from two different schools of acting. One believed in discipline, the other believed in freedom. And every scene they shared became a quiet reminder of how far apart those two worlds could be. Which of these behind-the-scenes tensions surprised you the most, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time!